During the pandemic, reality caught up with those ass-wiping investors, but there is no reality to catch up with buyers of residential property. The reality is the endless shortage. The housing mills never spun up to make 50 million more rolls of residential real estate.
We've seen more interest from private equity going into these supply-constrained markets with very strong demand, because they really see this as a protected market. There's not a lot of competition among landlords, which make this a great place to own property.
Yeah, because they fucking dip and come back 3 months later. They be like, past 3 months rent, please.
Most importantly,
like, fuck you.
To construct the housing needed. Oh, a housing market where people are sleeping in their cars? Oh, great. I love desperate inelastic demand. Yep, we've been so consistently bad at building housing for so long that our desperate requirement for it has made it into a reliable investment. Flipping property is such a normal career that where I live, producing TV shows about flipping property is a normal career.
The kitchen is where you want to invest your money. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck.
At City Hall, in academia, everyone knows the primary issue is supply. But the people in power are paralyzed. Homeowners vote at much higher rates than renters. Renters don't often see a vacant lot on their street and think, oh, that will be my first home in 5 years, so I guess I should go down to the public meeting and defend my future home's right to exist by defending some rich property developer that I don't know. Compounding this, existing owners benefit in aggregate from having less housing built. I mean, look at the house prices in Vancouver, a city that has managed to spend decades with a vacancy rate hovering around crisis levels of 1%. It worked out pretty well for some hippie who bought a bungalow in the 1980s. They're a millionaire now, just from being in the right place at the right time. And in a blast from the past, when places are redeveloped, it's usually lower income areas because renters are also poorer and the group of voters that you're most likely to be able to sneak one by on. Instead of facing our failure head-on, we've taken a leaf out of the 2016 Democratic Party playbook and blamed the Russians for our problems.
Our hottest housing markets in terms of prices since 2015 are like London and Woodstock and Tilsonburg. And we don't have Russian oligarchs buying up Tilsonburg.
We always do love blaming not us for our problems. We blame Airbnb, tourists, we blame foreign buyers, the Chinese. We set up rent control. Save us, rent control! We set up vacancy registries, rent registries, tax vacant properties. Every single policy has been implemented, and it hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. At best, it just slows down this march. My favorite thing that represents this category of time-wasting policy is the adventures of Mr. Counts Windows at Night Man. Mr. Counts Windows at Night Man doesn't need statistics or reports from the government or any data because he is the world's preeminent expert on how many windows should be illuminated in some condo tower that he saw at 11 p.m. one evening. Based on these windows in this location, I think that we're dealing with dirty money and property developers and foreigners. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Off to Facebook to let people know. When something gets enacted to appease these anecdotes and prices just keep marching higher, we tend to simply move on to the next feel-good idea. Before implementing its vacant house tax, Vancouver estimated there were more than 10,000 empty homes. But after implementation, it turned out it only applied to 2,538 units. In 2019, that dropped to 1,893 units. So we got 645 units out of the hands of those mysterious rich foreign investors, those genius investors who like to buy assets that they then lose money on because they're not leased out. To put that in perspective, the city of Vancouver is currently building around 7,000 units a year. So all that energy and discussion and work to give Vancouver what it builds in 1 month of a single year. Or take Airbnb, which had around 10,000 listings in my city before the bad thing. Well, that's about how many houses we build a year. So basically, okay, let's ban Airbnb. Great, you did it. Okay, now what next year? And the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. These drops in the bucket just consume so much of the public discourse for how measly the effects will be. Some places have literally started to run out of ideas for how to not face economic reality.
And we do know in Vancouver and in British Columbia, they've kind of thrown everything in the kitchen sink when it comes to these sort of policy prescriptions. So, they've got vacant home taxes at multiple levels, both the provincial and municipal level.
Oh my fuck.
They've got foreign buyer taxes and so on. They've done all of these things, and they've had some marginal impact. They seem to have lowered price growth a little bit for those one-bedroom condos, but it really hasn't changed much when it comes to family homes.
For people my age who've lived in reasonably nice cities their whole lives, a surplus supply of housing is hard to imagine. But supply and demand does still apply to housing, and one recent example certainly proves this. In New York, at the start of the pandemic, people left the city and their leases in droves because a $3,000 shoebox in the city that never sleeps when it's on bed rest made no sense when you can work from anywhere. Rents almost immediately started dropping. And of course, those people had to go somewhere, and they headed to the suburbs, where they had up all available supply and caused record increases in house prices. Oh my God, what a surprise! Population declines impacted my city in the 90s. The silver lining of population decline, where you're reducing demand, is those cheap houses. But, of course, there is a way to solve this housing equation that's less of a downer than economic depression. In one country that I know well, it's kind of my shtick, the situation has gotten so patently obvious that they are actually finally having to do something that will work. New Zealand closed its borders hard during the pandemic.
The North Korea of the South Pacific.
It then experienced, like many countries, a massive escalation in housing prices, but with no foreigners or immigrants to blame. The government knows its supply. Their reports are packed with lines like,
previous large increases in housing supply in New Zealand, such as during the 1970s, have reduced real house prices. In recent decades, several other countries have experienced declining house prices following significant increases in supply.
And from the Treasury,
supply of new houses is currently limited by regulatory infrastructure. Measures aimed at boosting housing supply seem to us a preferred way forward.
And then they did what most countries are probably going to do because it's what actually works. And I have never seen so many nerdy people's eyes light up in excitement over a piece of policy before. They used the magic of proportional representation, got it in, to pass laws agreed on by both the government and the opposition. Right to build. This means that developers have a right to build 3-story medium density housing in big cities without the typical barriers and consent requirements. They also passed laws removing height limits under 6 stories and car parking requirements nationwide. They're taking the ability to oppose housing developments out of the hands of local government, because at this point, we can look around all the countries in the world and see that this is just a universal flaw in local government. Local governments selected by local residents are unable to operate in a rational way for the good of their society when it comes to densifying housing. Locals can oppose highways and bike lanes and skateboarding kids, but there's really no good reason to oppose housing when we need housing. It's a house, and we need a lot of them, now more than ever. It's almost a gift to municipal politicians, the ability to say no and not lose their job. Oh, that new condo on your suburban street? I'm sorry, I can't help. I wish I could, but the higher-up government has overruled us on this one, sorry. What a policy like this also does is it spreads the burden of building housing across the entire country and all the neighborhoods in the cities. Rural voters living outside of the city don't give a shit about some 4-story building on your street that you think ruins neighborhood character. And when the suburbs, rural towns, and cities all take their share of the burden, instead of just the occasional car park downtown or transit corridor, the overall level of development isn't as hard to bear. The overall effect after a decade will be housing not being an incredibly stressful thing for your society, and denser and stronger towns. TM. Something wonderful about mature democracies is that they do value their citizens. That inflow of new people that come into our countries is part of why our houses are an investment-grade asset, and they're coming here because it's a nice place to live. But we've been snagged on a flaw in our democratic process, and it's crazy how much damage it's done to our societies. Lots of great things come from local citizen empowerment. It's just we can't give them all of the empowerment. Because, just like all progress, we often take it a little bit too far and make a mistake that then has to be cleaned up. We can't get enough materials, skilled tradespeople, and most importantly, space to construct that.
I see the cigarette.
Okay.
fucking.
I don't have enough dexterity
So,
in my hand to do 1,
I
2,
threatened it.
3. It's 1,
Yeah.
2,
And
5.
Yeah.
I'm going to
And another one
increase
over
the
here.
level of the
Then if I do this
emergency.
one first,
So
Yeah.
a letter
and this
goes
is
out.
also- See,
Calling
other
Saying
countries
them
have
to hurry
experienced
the fuck
declining
up.
housing
No, like
prices.
today.
It gives them
I don't sound like a
Monday and
conservative,
Tuesday.
such as during the 1960s.
While this is going on, my
Reduced
file
real
is
house
under
prices in
review,
recent
so I
decades.
can't get
Do I
any
sound
checks
like a
or money
Mormon
right now. I can't change my.
Something wonderful
Isn't
about
that the
mature
point,
I can't
though?
ask to
democracies
remove
is
the
that they
direct
do
deposit,
value their citizens.
and
It's like,
it's
sort of
until
like
it's
That's the
finalized
point.
this investigation.
Yeah, it's the whole point of the investigation.
Yeah, so that's why they can't change anything right now.
I'm not asking you to change anything.
No, I am because I'm trying to get them to get rid of my direct deposit entirely
Fucking money.
To move a lot of people and
send it to
Every
the mailbox
year,
and
we
check.
do
And he
this.
said this time the guy said that they can do that, which was the opposite of what the other guy said. So that's good.
No, because it's your money. So you give me my money any way you fucking want to give it to me.
Yeah, and they said that they're going to give me all in one large sum. So it's going to be a couple thousand.
Oh, for fuck's
But that I have to wait. So if they don't call by Tuesday, I got to call Wednesday. I'm probably going to call my lawyer.
Yeah, I call your lawyer again. Like,
reality. So,
your personal lawyer, not even the state lawyer.
Those are my lawyers.
Don't you have
I don't have fucking $300, $500 to pay for that lawyer again.
the guy in front of the Dairy Queen in
No,
China?
the only lawyer in Washington. And she let me drive around without a license for a year, but I had to pay huge amounts of
Oh,
cash.
that doesn't do it. There's a completely different lawyer.
No,
There's DUI.
She does everything.
Yeah,
That's all.
In fact, Canada is so
Yeah, like a
successful
legit
that
lawyer,
when Europe
like-
I
struggles
don't
to
have
get
that
their
money
freight
though.
share up
At
to
least this is
30%.
free.
We're
It's
already
being
around
paid
70.
for by the
Meanwhile,
HRA,
for in-city
by the
passengers,
director
there is
herself.
one
You don't need a
state-owned
real lawyer.
enterprise.
You just be like, I'm getting a lawyer.
He didn't like when I told him that I needed the email for the integrity department.
Hear his voice change? I heard his voice. At first, he's talking like Trudeau. Like, we're always looking for your best
Yeah,
interest.
because
And then
he
he
was
gets
silent for like fucking 5 minutes. I'm waiting. I'm like, I was gonna say hello, and then he was like, "Yeah, you could do that, but like we're under file." And he tried to do like the whole thing where he didn't exactly answer my question. He just like did what Trudeau did, and like
money? It's mine.
so.
My money.
Anyways,
You guys want to be in control of it, right?
I got his name at least, John. His agent number is 5057.
Thanks, Dawn.
Here is Victor.
But he said my file is under review, so that's why like the money hasn't been sent out. I still need the file, but the money isn't being sent out until they get this settled. He said things are taking a little long because of what's been going on with like everybody's EI. And,
Then you reimburse me and you figure it. You figure it out.
That's what they're doing.
Like the banks do.
And that's why Wednesday I got a call, and I got to see what's going on. If they didn't call.
You're a lot more generous than I, because I'd be like, you know what? You don't get this done today. I'm gonna be fucking showing up face to face in your building, sir. And that's a fucking threat.
That won't give me my money.
Oh, I will. Look how much more progression you get though. When you actually like be like,
Well, they don't.
I didn't notice that.
Because like, what I understood when I went there, when they gave me my bank information, they changed it. He said they changed it.
Yeah.
I went on
And then it fucked
the
up
site.
again.
I went on the site and it wasn't changed, so I asked him about that. He said, "Yeah, like it says on my file that it's changed, but everything right now is on hold because it's under review." So
Yeah, but you guys also told me that there was no change at all to begin with. Like, it doesn't look like my account information had been changed. It's just like, I don't give a shit what you guys
that's why I
are
asked
doing,
him,
but
what's him to stop
figure
him?
it out.
What's to stop him from still getting my money if we're going to use direct deposit when you guys didn't know it was changed?
Because it just changed again. You
And
just
all he said was like it's under review and that they're going to figure this out. Because I asked him about the breach of service Canada, he got silent again.
figure it
And
out.
then You just said the same thing that it's under review. Blah, blah, blah. I gave you the line.
Finance my money for me? Like,
And then
I
told him, so what you're telling me is if I don't get a call by agent by Tuesday, I call Wednesday, and I ask to see what's happening, like what's going on with the review, because it's taking too long.
No, this is ridiculous.
I can
my money.
inquire about a check again.
No, this is my money. It's money that's owed to me. That's contract work. Like, you don't get to do this to people. You can't do this to people. People get thrown out of their fucking homes, yo.
I'm thinking that, well, I
Look
talked
at
to Ian.
fridge.
I talked with Ian. He said, I just got to email John, but he's also going to talk to John.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fine.
I know that, but, like, you know what? That's not the point. The point is, if you'll be in charge of my fucking finances, then fucking finance my shit. I called you. You said you'd fix it. You still didn't fix it. You made it worse. Because now the guy just did it again. Like, you guys are a bunch of chumps. I don't give a shit what the fuck they do. Give me my money. You guys figure your shit out. I don't give a fuck. I'm not fucking Inspector Gadget here. Like, you guys could go do it. That's what the bank does. When I get my money still in the bank.
So, and I told him that I can't, like, the stuff on my Service Canada, when I look, it doesn't say it's under review and the bank information isn't changed. No. And he said he says he knows it's going to be, it's all on the file that is at Service Canada right now. There's an agent, they haven't looked at it yet.
Who the fuck you, John? You secretary? You fucking at the front desk?
That's actually, that's all he is, I guess.
Yeah, okay, well, how many fucking Johns are there? Like,
so,
my secretaries, you guys, like, they hire some fucking actual agents. That would be a good idea. You know what? Tell them next time I'm gonna pass like the girl from the phone, and let her fucking talk to you. Because you know what? Like, you guys want to call us the de facto fucking spouse? All right.
It's funny because he told me that there was an email for Integrity Department, and I told them that my lawyer said that there is an email that I could get and that I could get in touch with them. I'll send. And he got all silent again.
It's the ombudsman. It's the ombudsman, which is basically for your freedom of rights. Like, it's when your rights are imposed on. Like, and even your government is not fucking doing anything.
Yeah. So
they'll get like fucking ministers of affairs and shit. Like from.
That's that. Now I gotta call TransUnion. I don't know. I wrote 45 days, but I think it's because I have to wait 45 days. Then I gotta call TransUnion.
No.
I don't know. Oh, it's because the fucking guy wrote 32 instead of 31 because he couldn't do fucking math.
Yeah,
and that's why.
Once again, not my problem. Your computer should have already done the math, and also
the system, because I didn't answer the question wasn't answered right. It cut the file and it killed the file in like 2 minutes.
Just figure it out. Not my problem. Be firm, Cameron. This is your fucking money.
I am being firm.
I know.
I'm trying to get this shit done. I got everybody's fucking information here. I got everything written.
Because this is wrong. You can't do this to people. This is how people get thrown out of their homes. This is why people are starving on the side of the fucking road, dying of hypothermia in fucking porta potties, you know? Mm-hmm. We look like we are in a third world country. Like, fucking, like, our Mother Hubbard's kitchen. Like, you know? Like, we don't eat a fucking lot. Like, we don't eat 3 square meals a day. Okay? Like, this is fucked up.
Yeah, I know.
Dude, I was fucking walking my ass in there. It's like fucking, they owe me money. Like, I'm not paying taxes anymore, okay? Like, I'm gonna go fucking work for the natives because at least they pay me what they say they're gonna fucking pay me. And they don't take a cut on top of it.
Yeah.
They say, we're paying you this much for this amount of time. Done deal. That's it. No more. Like, fucking, you guys take my money, take my money, take my money. Like, fucking, and then you go, it's my fuck up? Fuck off. Get out of here.
You're still alive.
This guy's really good. The Paige Saunders. That's actually like very relative to Montreal.
Yeah.
You know, they're out.
What do you mean out?
That hurts. My leg.
I pulled your pie hair.
Dorval is not part of Montreal, apparently.
I thought it was.
Apparently not. Same as Longueuil.
No, yeah, it's not. It's not part of the island of Montreal. It's not on the island.
No, but
it's not on the island.
But you're okay.
You go across a bridge.
No.
To get back to our side.
Yeah, you will. I might pay for that bridge. Okay, so Oh, you're gonna make pee.
Make you wear the pee, baby.
Would you tell me if I had a hairy butt crack?
Uh-huh. Of course I would tell you. Oh, fucking pussy. You might want to shut your thing off.
Why do you want the neighbors to just keep giving them more reasons to hate me?
You're the one that's loud.
Still not anybody talking about it, but
As you know, I grew up about 5 streets away from where we are right now
wow.
on Fulford Street. When we thought of the canal, we remember how
Wait. What is your name?
dirty it was and
Oliver
the
Jones.
smell. I had several friends who used to like to come.
No. Harder.
It's away from where we are right now on Fulford Street. When we thought of the canal, we remember how dirty it was and the smell. I had several friends who used to like to come and swim in it, but it was the one thing my parents would not allow me to do. So
that was like the quarry.
it was and the smell
Everyone would fucking swing there. My fucking mom was like,
on Fulford Street.
people doing
When we
rocks
thought of the
underneath.
canal, we remember how dirty it was and the smell. I had several friends who used to like to come and swim in it, but it was the one thing. My parents would not allow me to do. So when I came back in 1980, I was really surprised to see that they had cleaned it up, and it's a beautiful place to come now. So, bravo for that.
Yeah, obviously educated, not back home.
I started playing piano
As if it's a sheen.
3 years old.
Yeah.
My older sister used to say that
My daddy.
one day they were sitting down after school and they heard me playing a tune that was on the radio. It was something that
Cool.
That came very natural to me. Actually, the smart one in the family was my mother, because when she was doing her housework, she said that's the only place that I was quiet. She said I could leave you for an hour, 2 hours, and I would just bang on the piano. But all that changed, and within a year, I started to play melody. And at the age of 5, I did my first performance at the Union United Church, which is on Atwater and Deville, not too far from here. The next year, when I was 6, I heard Oscar Peterson for the first time, and that really encouraged me. Oh, we have a piano here also?
Yeah, it's really shooting it off. Oh God, thanks.
ਲਓ ਜੀ, ਇਹ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਆ ਮੌਂਟਰੀਅਲ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦਾ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਾਜੇ ਨੇ ਵਸਾਇਆ ਸੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਸੀਗਾ ਜਿੰਦ ਵਿਲੀਅਮ। ਇਹ ਰਾਜਾ ਨਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਪਰਲੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਤੇ ਆਹ ਰਾਜੇ ਦੇ ਕੋਟ ਨੇ। Here. Yeah. Fucking nice roll that on that fucking 5G networking, bitch.
In Quebec,
You know
a
what?
tattooed...
No more. No more of this. fucking killing him. Fucking garbage. Not a fucking way. Nothing but fucking fuck yourself. Yeah.
Not so long ago, the Lachine Canal was a mass of factories, and the air was thick with smoke and noise. Today, the canal has become parkland and a zone of affluence. But in behind, a stone's throw from where you are now standing, are the old working-class neighborhoods that have struggled with the loss of jobs and now gentrification.
Well, the Canal Audio Walk is an hour-long walk of the canal between Atwater Market and here at St. Gabriel's Lock. And it tells the story of this neighborhood through people's own memories and their own voices. The tour lasts an hour, and you hear this history from multiple perspectives, from people who live in the area, people who work in the area, people who grew up in the area, people who've moved into this area as condo owners, for example. And there's a lot of diverse and sometimes conflicting stories. Behind me is Robin Hood Flour, which used to be the old St. Lawrence flour mill. An important moment in Canadian labor history happened right here. In 1977, there was a major strike that lasted weeks that ended in violence, and strikebreakers were being brought in through the train. And right behind me, you'll see the tracks, and so there's a lot of confrontation which ended in shooting. And so out of that whole confrontation, we had the first sort of law in North America against replacement workers in Quebec. So the anti-scab laws is sort of known.
And they hated us. I mean, one guy came in, he got beat up. So they said, okay, we're going to get the security guys to pick you up and drive you home. You know, these are, wrestlers, and these guys were wearing like leather gloves with the fingers missing, and they weren't just regular leather gloves, they were padded with lead. They had their car rentals to actually pick us up and drive us to work.
Oh. That's
why. We're standing at St. Gabriel's Lock, which is sort of ground zero for urban change in Montreal. Behind me, you see both Northern Electric, which was one of the largest brick buildings, industrial buildings in Canada, which closed in the early 1970s. On the other side of me is Red Path Sugar, which also closed around the same time. Now, what we see also are these cranes, right? So these are industrial spaces that have now gentrified. And this whole zone along the canal is an area of tremendous change, right? I don't know how many cranes are around us. And of course, that brings controversy, right? The working class neighborhoods in behind Point St. Charles, Little Burgundy, have a lot of questions about the change going on.
He will give you a bunch of answers.
In Quebec,
nope.
a tattooed...
Shut the fuck up. Fucking dumb fucking face. Fucking racist piece of shit. Fucking can't handle it. Fucking...
Oh, cool. I almost never see a train coming out of this spur.
What?
I've never seen it come. Here it is, coming through that spur that goes to like Robin Hood Flour or something.
No fucking way. What?
It's got the caboose.
What's wrong with him?
There it is coming up. About 4 cars from that
What for?
the granary or whatever it is.
Oh my god, that's this year. Oh no, okay. Well then, I guess, they do go down there. Fragile. Hey. Stop shooting. Oh, whoa, why
When inspiration strikes, go after it. In the German-engineered redesigned 2022 Tiguan with standard 4Motion all-wheel drive and the available CarNet app that connects to your vehicle in over 20 ways. With a kick of a foot, Tiguan can keep up with family life, which comes in handy because kids change their minds a lot. When family happens fast, you'll be ready. That's how to Tiguan. Volkswagen. New Sensodyne Sensitivity and Gum is a dual-action toothpaste with a low abrasion formula. It builds a protective layer over sensitive areas and targets and removes plaque. Dual-action, new Sensodyne Sensitivity and Gum.
Before I was sick for 3 weeks, I went along to the Mega Gaming Expo with my friend and his son, who has decided that he wants to make video games. What better place to see the industry than the capital of the industry in Canada, Montreal. I thought, this seems like a really good opportunity to tag along and film a child playing video games. I really enjoy watching socially awkward programmers being forced to make eye contact with people for extended periods of time, seeing the kind of behind the scenes of them rushing around, fixing stuff are right there in front of you. You have the really big studios, Ubisoft and EA and stuff, and then you have all the small guys, literally. You have the guy who's on the poster of a company, or like one or two dudes sitting next to this computer showing off this thing that they've been working on for years. They finally got to roll their DeLorean into the mall car park and have Marty McFly here and see what they've been up to. When I know that an industry is subsidized, I always have this is this real thought in the back of my head.
Just don't think these guys are for real.
Ultimately, if you throw enough money at anything, you can have what looks like a success, but maybe it's not a long-term sustainable thing. In this video, I'm looking at why the gaming industry has taken off, and I'm asking the question, could all of it be taken away? There's the standard base programs that any business in Canada or Quebec can use. Low interest loans and financing and self-employment support. Hey, instead of being unemployed, how about being self-employed for a year? And you also have things like the Canadian Media Fund. They're probably going to make it rain on the maple syrup tycoon. However, the programs that are most interesting are the ones that actually specifically deal with the gaming industry. Most of it is tax credits. So what tax credits are is the government saying, if you make money, you can pretend that you didn't make money with this credit on your tax account. When you hear in the news, like Amazon, Walmart's Electric Co. made $22 billion last year and they didn't pay any taxes, tax credits. So a refundable tax credit for a corporation is like the Cadillac of tax credits. This is actually the form of tax credits that most of ours are. It's a tax credit that lets you go sub-zero. So that's the situation where it's like, this company made $1 billion last year and we're paying them $500 million.
Fucking outrageous.
Would you like to know more? Of the $4.2 billion, about $2.7 billion arrived in the form of tax credits. So with tax credits for the gaming industry, we have one core one, which is 100% for them, and then two ones that they can access to a smaller degree. The first one is called Tax Credit for Multimedia Titles. This is the core one for the gaming industry. It's up to 37.5% off your employees' salaries. It's capped at $100,000 for 80% of your employees. So you can have like 1 in 5 employees that you elect to get the same 37.5% off who earn over $100,000. If the title is in French and it's being marketed as a commercial product, you can get the maximum amount, and then it kind of goes down from there. The other tax credit is called the e-business tax credit. It's not specifically for gaming, but you can see how gaming companies do access this tax credit, building like a server behind the scenes or some tools or maybe a bug database. It's smaller in that it's only 24% or so of wages, but it's accessed by 600 companies, which is a lot more than the multimedia title tax credit. The third one, which the gaming industry kind of gets their sticky fingers into a little bit, is the research and development tax credit. The R&D tax credit basically says to companies, I know that you enjoy making ineffective cold medicines, but maybe what you could do is make an effective cold medicine. Here, we'll sweeten the pot. If you get like a couple of your employees working on making a cold medicine that actually works, then we'll kick in like some of their salaries. R&D tax credits are a kind of bullshit. I mean, most of the tax credits are effectively the government's having to come up with some metric to say, oh yeah, this company deserves it. Research showed that they were prone to being abused. So governments, including the government of Quebec, have kind of like tightened things up over the years. There's this whole industry of consultants who come in and help you access the tax credit.
To stay on top of all the different programs that are available, they're changing every year. And I find it very useful to have people who are very specialized in that regard.
I've actually experienced this myself, seeing this guy come in and be like, can you use this word 3 times in this sentence? Because that's how the bureaucratic person, stamping off on it. They just need to see this word here and here for you to have access to the funds. That whole thing was just such a kind of like, thank you, government, for deciding that this is the way the money should be distributed. The problem you get is you build this boutique industry of consultants, which only reasonably large businesses can afford. So the money's not going towards the person who has like 2 employees and has just started out a company. The money is instead going towards the company that can afford this $200,000 a year consultant character who fill in the form for them. So in summary, with the tax credits, the gaming industry at this point has access to at least 230 million, right up to about 1.2 billion. To contrast that, the whole film, TV, and live show industry in Quebec adds up to around 400 million. So the gaming industry is a bigger play than even all of that. And all of that includes a lot of like supporting French language stuff and all those mandates as well. So yeah, it's a big guy. The financial stuff is obvious. There's a kind of less obvious cost. If you have $1 billion, $1 billion is going to make a big difference anywhere. We could maybe have a car manufacturing industry or like solar panels or, medical, biotech. If you throw $1 billion into something, you're going to change the economy around. There's also a cost for other businesses. So how do you explain this? Can you sit at a computer for long hours and do technically demanding activities? You're hired, says half of the managers in the country. There's a lot of industries that would like to use those workers. Cough Medicine Co., with their garbage cough medicines, are paying $1,000 a week to do the work, and Ubisoft can get the same person for $700 a week. You end up kind of competing with the government instead of having an even playing field, and you never really know what that costs your economy. In the long term, if we had done nothing, we might have ended up with this kind of organically built a natural industry. Obviously, people in the tech sector, which is what the gaming industry mainly is, are highly employable. Some people would argue that you shouldn't subsidize the salaries of people who wouldn't have any issue getting a job and should instead be subsidizing, say, a former wood pulp worker who doesn't have a job right now and actually is struggling to get employment. I kind of experienced this one myself while I was working at a locally owned company. Probably half the employees left that company and ended up working at Ubisoft. I actually met up with someone the other day, and this asshole had left to work at Ubisoft. And I said to them, would you say you're getting paid about 37.5% more there? And they laughed and said, yeah. So, you can see it in effect in a very real way there for these employers that just don't happen to be quite in that sort of tech sector. People start to notice hundreds of millions of dollars in tax money or potential revenue going into these multi-billion-dollar corporations. So the big benefactors get political. Ubisoft always have been. They're actually involved in crafting the program originally. They create these trade organizations that work to defend and embed the tax credits permanently. Aside from the trade organizations, they also do this thing where they distribute jobs around different electorates so that they have this wide voter base that's going to defend the tax credit.
You think the whole sub is made in one place? Because the fin or whatever the fuck, it comes from one factory in one state. And then this little round fucking window comes from another place, right? And the fuel rods are from Cheese Dick, Wisconsin. We are going to lose votes and seats everywhere.
As an example, Ubisoft. Time for some more around Ubisoft. So Ubisoft opens an office in Saguenay, and sure, you can say, oh, thanks, Ubisoft. You're just doing a great job of making sure you get to all the potential employees you can have there. Because, well,
fire and fucking him.
Montreal. Sure, but you can also see how they make it really hard for any politician campaigning to
we all want to
welfare
hit
to get elected in Montreal, in Quebec City, and now the Saguenay, and anywhere else that they choose to open an office. Because in a lot of these communities, the Ubisoft studio will seem like the good news story of the last decade. It's the ominous threat behind subsidies that become very, very big. You end up with industries that feel entitled to the tax credit, who are kicking in funds to your political system and making these groups that look like they're citizens, but they're not really. It'll be like citizens in support of the gaming industry, and they lobby and make sure that you will never, ever be rid of them.
Fucking outrageous.
Yeah,
that's how you end up with a very liberal province like British Columbia still subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, or Saskatchewan, which subsidizes farming. Neither of those industries need the tax credits anymore, but it's really, really hard for you to take that money back after you start giving it out. So it kind of costs us in a political way as well outside of Quebec. We get blamed for not having our finances in order.
Quebec tabled a budget with a $4 billion surplus thanks to a $13 billion equalization payment from Ottawa, which came from the workers that many of you have had to lay off.
We can't be totally sure that this is going to work. So it's kind of like having a bunch of debt and then going back to university for a random degree, even though we already have a few good degrees. Ontario and Alberta are like your parents saying like, whoa, why don't we pay that debt down and then you can do this. Those are the obvious downsides, the sort of thing you'd get any time that you subsidize an industry. But what did we get for this? Well, we got an industry that didn't exist before. And as talented and creative as Montreal is, I think it's absolutely 100% without a doubt would not have an industry this size if the government hadn't thrown all this money in. And in the 90s, when the Parti Québécois put this in, it was really groundbreaking, The video game industry wasn't like it is now, a much bigger industry than film. So I think you got to give them credit for seeing an opportunity, and as a government jumping on that, it's pretty ballsy. In the 80s and 90s, there were studios everywhere. You had Bullfrog in the UK and Noel in the House in Australia, which made KKND, which was my favorite game when I was a kid. For some reason, Texas had ID Software and Apogee, which made Hocus Pocus, which I used to play. Nevada had Westwood, but by the end of the 90s, it basically consolidated. And Montreal, through doing this, managed to actually make us a video gaming center. We're the fifth largest center of video gaming in the world. The other thing that you'll always see used as an argument when there's a subsidized industry is what's called economic multipliers. Ubisoft open up their office in the Mile End and they rent space from some local person who now gets to have money. They drive a food truck into the building and defeat the purpose of it being a truck. And then Ubi Sushi opens up down the road and they get to make money. And multipliers are real. They're kind of the difference between a big developed economy and a small economy is just cash flowing around between things. So the issue is if the government were all right, guys, we're just going to pay $1 billion for people to dig a hole, and it's kind of a mining, I guess it's a mining subsidy. Those people would still buy a hot dog at lunch. The question really is this a good economic multiplier versus other industries? The multipliers for the video game industry are really good. Mining, for example, doesn't have great multipliers. Video games, though, the people that are working in these offices, living in Montreal, buying in the local market, it's pretty good industry for multipliers. However, I think the most obvious argument against the multipliers is, well, why spend $1 million? Let's spend $100 billion and get $1 trillion worth of economic multipliers. It's pretty obvious that the multipliers taper off because at some point, to raise the money to subsidize the industry, you're taxing Ubi Sushi so much that it's not worth Ubi Sushi existing. So when we're talking about all these subsidies and stuff, there is a parallel story going on I call the Hollywood story. It's the 1920s, the film industry took off in California. It became the ubiquitous capital of filmmaking in the world. The industry did very well, and out of that came the VFX industry. But in the 1990s, British Columbia, which happened to be in the same time zone and just 3 hours flight away, started offering subsidies. And at first that just meant that Mulder and Scully were running around Vancouver instead of wherever they were supposed to be, like Chicago or something. Where are they supposed to be based? I think it's part of actually what makes the X-Files so weird, because you're watching it and you're like, where is this place?
Vancouver.
So eventually, it drained the entire VFX industry from LA and relocated it to Vancouver. So a lot of veterans of the industry kind of make jokes about, like, remember that 10-year period where everyone had to decide if they wanted to live in Canada or do something else with their career. And then what happened is, because film and VFX is super sexy, politicians were like, oh yeah, I like that. They basically took that same policy and just added 5%. All of a sudden, the UK and Singapore and Australia have these huge VFX subsidies. By 2017, British Columbia was forking out like $2 billion a year. The government came in and had to just kind of pump the brakes on it, right? So now the question is, after all that expense, has Vancouver actually got something long-term here? Or did we just ignite a fire with gasoline and then it just burnt off and now we don't have anything? This brings up the obvious point. If the subsidy actually works, then it's probably not going to be sustainable, because the bigger the industry gets, the more that it costs. And you can very easily find yourself in a race to the bottom with other places who are prepared to pay even more money with lower wages. There's a lot of stories coming out about, we subsidized it so much, but we didn't subsidize it to this crazy amount that these guys prepared to, so these assholes left, and then we had to spend $1 billion and we got nothing. So we have to move out of this race to the bottom thing. So far the program has worked, but now we're in a different phase, and the strategy has to change. We're at full employment. Other jurisdictions have jumped on, and now you can see similar tax credits being applied in other countries, and even right next door in Ontario.
The leading experts in tax relief for UK game developers.
And some of these places, they're going to be able to outspend us, and they're going to have educated workers who could potentially work for less. These costs are also increasing dramatically. I think we need to move now into what I call phase 2 of the gaming industry in Quebec. We need to transition to a sustainable model that's not just based on being cheap, because that's just stupid. You're not going to win that game. Point 1, we have to support original and innovative stuff and make sure we aren't just subsidizing studios that are doing porting or don't have any senior management right here based in Quebec. The Ubisoft example, I think, is pretty good. Ubisoft Montreal used to make games like Donald Duck Going Quackers. Not a classic game, didn't even know it existed. Then Ubisoft decided to close its New York office and consolidate its North American headquarters here in Montreal. They brought this stealth shooter along with them called The Drift. The Montreal office had been tasked with building a new Tom Clancy game, and they turned The Drift into Splinter Cell, which became a really big hit. Then the studio created this parkour-heavy version of Prince of Persia, which resulted in the original IP Assassin's Creed. So there's your progress, right? You're making a Donald Duck Crash Bandicoot clone, and then you're kind of like building something that is original, but maybe the original idea didn't come domestically, and then ultimately you create a brand new thing, which is incredibly 2004. Hey guys, remember parkour? That's where you want to be. So now we have a situation with Ubisoft where it's way harder for them to leave Montreal, because we moved from being just a production line to a thing where, like, all of the IP and all the people who originally made a thing which made them a bunch of money are based in Montreal. If they left Montreal, Ubisoft would have to try to convince hundreds of Montrealers to move to France or wherever the next office is going to be, because those people are so integral to them being able to make successful games. So in the government subsidies, we don't want to be funding porting, because the decision on where you have a studio is not just about dollars. So if, like, Nintendo decided to move its workforce to Orlando, we all know they wouldn't be able to make the same games. You couldn't say, oh, you could do this anywhere. This is a thing for the government to do right now. We want to develop a reputation that Montreal has some special source for new ideas, just like New York or the finance industry or Houston is for the oil industry. You got to be special. and special is actually not really about salary. How do you do this? Well, a lot of people have already looked at this. It's a pretty common problem. It's interesting to note the Canadian Media Fund pushes for original content already, so you can't get money from them for like sequels. So Red Barrels, which is a local producer, textbook example of the sort of thing you want to promote, when it made Outlast, it used their funding to get the first version of the game off the ground. So you could set things up so that the subsidy is staggered.
Cracker and all I registered was crack.
Original first concept,
you get
the
crack.
37.5% subsidy, or maybe even more. But you don't get that for like the sequel. If you're doing something like coding a game, you have a very, very small subsidy. So you would have bigger producers saying something like, well, let's get Montreal to create the original title, and we'll get the Toronto office to do the port, because those idiots don't know how to spend money. The point is, we now have like a real dumb kind of flat tax credit, and we probably should start to play with it and tweak it a little bit so that it pushes things in the direction that we want. Another solution for our current predicament is placing money into education. It's almost always better to put money into education than it is putting it into companies, because those people that you invest in, even if the gaming industry doesn't work out or whatever, those educated citizens are going to be an asset to whatever else comes down the pipeline. At this point, we're the fifth largest region for game development in the world, and we've got historically...
no more.
We're now being constrained by hires, not new international studios. Every couple of months, a new studio is announced, and they're not soaking up any slack in employees. So we want to set up these education programs so that local kids can more easily join the industry and bolster the ranks, and also probably want to set up half the residency programs so that young, talented people from around the world can move here and move us from fifth to fourth or third. What I'd propose is a program that gave people a no-interest loan to move to Quebec from other places, as long as they're going to end up in a university program, a polytechnic, that feeds into the video game industry. This loan is no interest, and you're going to get trained. But if you leave the province of Quebec, you're going to start to pay a lot of interest. Well, if you stick around, eventually, because of inflation, that loan's going to be nothing. You pay it off in one paycheck if you finish out your career in Quebec. This program doesn't even have to be international. It could be residents from other provinces. Right now, people from Ontario, when they're weighing up where they want to go to university,
it's like algebra. Why you got to put numbers and letters together? Why can't you just go fuck yourself?
They choose Ontario just because they don't want to be stuck washing dishes for a year, waiting until they can go to university. The third pillar of this new phase would be to support local businesses rather than these international companies. We want to domesticate this industry. We want to keep VIP here. Of course, it is weird to be subsidizing these big foreign corporations. The worst thing is that we have these really high taxes on small businesses here in Quebec, the highest in Canada. We've essentially kind of engineered things so that we encourage large Ubisoft operations and discourage independent studios. It's kind of crazy. Back in the old days when Ubisoft first came in, the local operators had to fight to get the credit that was being given to Ubisoft applied to themselves. And that alone tells you that the original plan really wasn't thought through too much, and it was very, very much focused on these large multinationals. So we should adjust these subsidies so they favor domestic companies now. We've got the big...
For nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure. This remark by Ralph.
So you could reduce the subsidy a little bit for international developers and increase the subsidy a little bit for local developers.
Oh, fucking salad shit.
The fourth pillar, something we should write into this policy at this point, is a sunset clause. If by 2050, say, we can't make video games in Montreal without massive government subsidies, then we fucked up. This isn't farming where you can argue, well, for national security purposes. So what we could do is set up subsidies so that it holds for, say, 10-year period, and then it starts to decrease by a percentage point every year after that. So you would combine this with moving subsidies to local businesses from foreign businesses, and you could actually give huge support for small, locally owned studios, because we now have more funds available, as there is an eventual reduction in the amount we're paying. Sunsetting also helps address that special interest problem with politics where the companies entrench themselves. It kind of lets them know this is not a forever thing, and lets them plan for a future that doesn't have them subsidized to the tune of $1 billion or $2 billion a year by the local government. When I say phase 2 and talk about the video game industry, I'm thinking a lot of the model for developing countries.
The company started in 1974, making plastic parts for TV sets, but under Boa's leadership, has grown into the world's biggest contract electronics manufacturer.
So we're currently moving into the later phase of this. Companies like Panache, who make Ancestors, Chasing Rats, who make Struggling, and Trebuchet, who do this VR party stuff, are Quebec owned and operated, and they're making really unique content, and we need to back that stuff really, really hard. I think it's really timely that we start having this conversation about the video game industry, because remember Vancouver and its VFX industry? Well, guess where many of those companies are now starting to open satellite offices? It's Montreal. There's been an 88% increase in the number of companies doing this here because we have better subsidies. It's interesting that just as we start to realize the race to the bottom that we may have entered into in one industry, we're finding ourselves being that competitor that's coming in and making it impossible for another province to the industry. It is the originator of subsidies, and a lot of it is because the only person that likes red carpets more than film stars is politicians.
Now, this is a message for the people of Quebec, c'est-à-dire un message pour les gens du Québec. Je suis Jean Fromage, un comédien célèbre du Grande-Bretagne. Mais malheureusement, je suis mort.
Rest in peace, Mr. Cleese. He's not dead, just weird.
You're weird.
Now, you might be asking, why does John Cleese care about what's going on in Quebec? Well, the next provincial election is going to be a little bit different. Get ready for the fear-mongering, folks, because it's proportional representation referendum time in Quebec. Do you think that when half of people vote for a party, that party gets half of the seats in Parliament? Well, they don't.
Is it already 12 o'clock?
Actually,
Great.
In Quebec, this is what the popular vote looks like. And this is the seats that the parties actually got. Having a parliament that isn't what people vote for causes quite a few problems, of course. These are problems which you've just grown up with. You think they're normal, but they actually really suck. You know, like the church dictating how you live your life. And Quebec is due for another quiet revolution, where we update our voting system to the one used by almost every other modern democracy. How does using a dated electoral system cause what people vote for to not be reflected in power? Right now, Quebec is divided into 125 electoral districts. Each of these districts is equal to one seat in the Quebec National Assembly. When you go to vote in your electoral district, you choose who will represent you there. Yeah, so how is that connected to not getting what we thought? This problem exists because when first past the post was first implemented, it was each person standing on their own 2 feet, voting independently on each issue, choosing what was best for those people that were in their riding. But George Washington could see a problem and spend much of his farewell address warning about it. Something we now take for granted had started to emerge, the political party. And literally, as soon as he stepped down, the next president was in a party. Now, though, we can see hundreds of years later, with hundreds of democracies of experience, that political parties are just what happens. They exist for the same reason that Saint-Hubert exists. It lets you know what you're going to get. And consistency is a huge part of what people want from the government. With political parties, you basically bundle a set of values into a political brand. Party whips.
Before all of my cars are gone.
They keep the person you elected in line with this brand. When they don't stay in line, they get ejected. The downside is that it does kind of turn politics into a team sport. But as long as you have a few teams to choose from, it works pretty well. You can probably find a team you like and only have to keep track of the different teams rather than every single player in the league. So what is the disadvantage of having an electoral system that pretends people vote for candidates when the research conclusively
shows that people usually vote for parties. In order to find out, let's hit the slopes.
Right there. Bon. C'est bon. That's exactly what it sounds like.
All you have to do is drive through the
dog names are the worst. Home.
This town is in the Labelle electoral district, a long time Quebec stronghold. So unsurprisingly, in the 2018 election, the 30-year streak of voting for nationalists continued. It was a pretty normal story from this election of the CAQ gobbling up votes from the Parti Quebec. But in the mix of a popular vote, there's a decent number of socialist and liberal candidates that you'd see anywhere in Quebec.
Yeah. Oh, really? Am I the one signed in? No one, right? Awesome. Great.
For example, is what the
No, wait.
look like.
Fucking keep on my shit. Okay.
And Chantal from the CAQ headed off to represent this riding in Quebec City with 36.5% of the vote. For the Parti Quebec voters, finding out that Chantal's representing them is a little bit like finding out that Maurice Richard is being subbed out to
I don't care.
You know, it could be worse. They're probably still reasonably happy with the outcome.
Fucking cannot do this hockey bullshit conversation anymore. Like, please.
Take some time out to look at the proportion of
If you're a 12-year-old,
so
fine, whatever. No, you're not.
Okay with Chantal.
Can you please talk about something that's like, I don't know.
And Party voters, I suspect that they may not be. In fact, it could be decades before they see someone representing their views in office. Maybe never. And when those voters have an issue with something like a new highway being built or a new train line going in, they're going to have to go see Chantal, someone who they don't really see eye to eye with. But you know, you win some, you lose some. Let's have a look at the other electoral districts in the region, like Bertrand, right next door. Bertrand, and all you have to do is drive through Labelle. Well, there's still a bunch of supporters of other parties, but looks like the CFQ got this one too. What about beside that in Argenteuil? More of the same. Okay, what if we zoom out and look at the region that all of these districts are in? Wow, all CAQ. Literally, all 10 members of the National Assembly from this region are from one party. Look at that.
Convenient.
Most people in this region didn't actually vote for that party. If the politicians from this region actually represented their constituents, it would be sending something like 5 CAC members, 3 PQ members, 1 QS member, and the Liberals get 1 guy. So this situation would give that Liberal person someone to go to if the CAQ person wasn't taking them seriously. But also, these are bridge builders. They would all be people who actually live there. So a socialist who cares about the ski industry, or like a Liberal Party member who actually spends most of their time around people who see sovereignty quite differently, but than a person like myself who never leaves the island of Montreal. Of course, you might be a CAQ voter who thinks, ha, suck it, not so fast, annoying, intolerant person in my head. Let's take a look at the 27 ridings that make up another region, the island of Montreal. The CAQ only got 2 seats, way out of the northern tip of the island. So Montreal is looking like a feast for a Liberal voter with their federalism and almond milk. But it's not great because some other people around you have different beliefs. 17% of people on the island voted for the CAQ, but they only got 7% of the power with those 2 seats. 12% voted for the Parti Québécois, and they got 0. This creates what I consider to be the worst dynamic of our electoral system for Quebec. You know how the CAQ won the election and formed the government? Well, how much influence do you think that those 2 people from the island have on them? Yeah, fuck all. Here are some of the big names in government. Let's see where they're from. Premier, Deputy Premier, Finance Minister, Economic Development Minister, Health Minister, New Health Minister, Education Minister. Of the 29 people in cabinet who write the policy that impacts your life as a Montrealer, for 4 years, only 1 member of the cabinet comes from the island of Montreal, the economic and cultural powerhouse of Quebec, with a quarter of the population of the province. It got minister responsible for the Montreal region. Gee, thanks, guys. Well, at least we got that. So the government in power isn't really connected to the biggest city at all. They are bastards. They would like more seats. If they had 10 seats in Montreal, I'm sure Montreal would have more seats in cabinet. Now the people sitting around the table making decisions for how our province is run don't owe voters from Montreal anything at all. I don't blame them for not thinking that much about places like Westmont St. Louis, which has literally never given anyone other than the Liberal Party a chance. The CAQ won't get an extra seat from them. It doesn't even make sense for them to try. So unsurprisingly, many in Montreal have felt ignored over the last 2 years, and the famine will continue. But just a few years ago, the famine was elsewhere. The urban areas were having a great time. A false majority, meaning the Liberal Party could do anything it wanted, even though it didn't have a majority of the votes. And so it goes, a representation feast followed by a representation famine. Election after election after election. It's called policy lurch, where as a voter you often feel like you're feasting with a banquet of policy working to support you, and in the next election, it's all taken away. The government resources have been redirected elsewhere, to a different voter base. There's a second issue that's more well known, and that is the role of minor parties. Because people vote for parties, you often have a proportion of people in every riding who voted for everybody. Look at my riding. In 2018, here's a breakdown of all the candidates and how many votes that they got. Now, it's not surprising that the gay village would vote for a lesbian and liver, but did everyone get what they wanted? Quebec routinely tops out the polls as the province most concerned about climate change. The year after this election, the largest environmental protest in Canadian history walked through this district. It seems a little weird that the environment is so important to people, but only 3.5% of people voted for the Green Party? Well, it's because people don't want to throw away their vote. With first past the post, if you don't choose a frontrunner, your vote is very unlikely to count. People vote for the least bad option all the time. It's so sad. This is democracy. Vote for okay. For all those voters who think climate change is the largest challenge facing humanity, they strategically choose to vote for the party that at least has it on their radar. Many of them are probably federalists. Quebec Solidaire are not, but they have to compromise on that value because otherwise someone they really don't like might get in. So how many members of the Green Party does Quebec have in Parliament? The province with the highest environmental concern in Canada. 0 at any level. Now, most countries have a few minor parties, or as some people call them, nut job weirdos. More ham! Okay. More jobs for butchers! Alright. Lock up the vegans! These guys stand up in Parliament and they say some outlier shit, but they usually stay a minor party and get brought into the fold by figuring out the stuff that you can agree on with them. Okay, how about this? Let's give hungry kids more ham in their school lunches. Sound good, buddy? It was weird how often I came around to an idea growing up in New Zealand that originated in these small parties. They're kind of like political startups. A lot of innovative policy and ideas. Often you feel like, oh yeah, you know, I don't always agree, but that one is reasonable. What we have here with first past the post is a system that says, lock them out. They're crazy. Don't give them a seat at the table. We don't want them here. With that same electoral system, the UK Independence Party got 12.6% of the vote and 0.2% of the seats in 2015. What do you think will happen when you treat people like that? What do you think they'll do when they finally get in or can vote directly on an issue? Repression is not the way to handle a view that you don't like.
For those basic reforms which alone can preserve the fabric of their societies. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable.
It's far better to temper those views and bring them into the political fold from the very start, rather than let it build up pressure. The feast or famine dynamic is also amplified when you don't have minor parties. Small political parties often swing both ways.
Oh my god, actually,
There's
right.
intermediary coalition partners. Some parties will team up with one government, and in the next election they'll turn around and they'll team up with the other. This acts a little bit like ballast in a ship and helps create a continuity of policy across governments. Additionally, with first past the post, you almost always win the election with far less than 50% of the vote. You're often trading off between two governments with quite different voter bases. With proportional representation, there are people that win over in every single riding. The CAQ will have voters in Westmont for a change. And also, at least 50% of people voted for the government every time. So it's really unsurprising that proportional representation makes people feel better about their government. I mean, most people for a change would have actually voted for it. Flipping between two parties with different voter bases, on the other hand, will have you lunching up your lunch. To see this in action, check out high-speed rail in Ontario, America's environmental policy.
They need your truck, eh?
Colon.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. All right, so
What?
don't mind about everything that's wrong. Let's talk about what's right. So to fix the issues with our old system, an agreement was signed just before the 2018 election by all parties that weren't in power. It said if any of them won, they would upgrade Quebec's voting to a modern and proportional system. One of those parties was the CAQ. So when they got elected, they went away. And then there was a bit of, hello, hey, where's that really important reform document? Francois, are you coming back? Oh, good, you're back. They came up with this, Bill 39. Instead of just implementing proportional representation, it had turned into a referendum. Now, this is not surprising. Once a team wins a game, they don't usually want to change the rules. However, as most people know who follow this stuff, they usually just don't come back. Isn't that right, Justin, you motherfucker?
The 2015 election will be the last federal election using first past the post.
There is no consensus. There is no clear path forward. It would be irresponsible for us to do something that harms Canada's stability when, in fact, what we need is moving forward on growth for the middle class and support.
Honorable member for Outremont.
Don't know what that means. You get to stay in the confidence of home.
So the next party that comes in
my
can't
God,
just
really?
remove us. And, I'm glad that they're putting it up to a referendum because it is really important. And it's time to directly tell the government, fix this like this. So we know that parties are a fact of life and not going anywhere. And we know that a lot of voters aren't getting a seat at the table and feel excluded. We also know about this feast and famine problem. So how do we fix this? What if we just say 1% of the votes means 1% of the seats? We tell parties, okay, your percentage works out to 15 seats. And then they go down a list of politicians and choose who to put in the seats. But that could be a bit of a problem. I mean, 1% of voters will vote for the Saint-Hubert rooster. It could be a bit distracting having seats occupied by radical people and joke parties that represent just 1% of voters, pulling stunts and getting in fights and being a giant cock. So what if we put a minimum threshold on it? What about 10%? If you get at least 10% of the votes, you get seats. But this list of politicians, who are they? Does the party just reach into some bag and pull out random politicians? I mean, we did just talk about making sure that the politicians that we elect come from across the province and aren't just all urbanites or all people from the regions at the same time. Also, many people find it useful to have a local politician with an office nearby, someone that you can contact who is your local person. Okay, so how about you let the election run like it is just now? People vote, and you end up with 125 local politicians. And after the election is over, you see who didn't get enough seats, and you top them up with some of those ones from the party list. Well, that's pretty good. You now have a local person, and the number of politicians are in proportion, but now there's way more politicians and 125 chairs in the assembly. Guess we could add more chairs, but then I think people would start complaining about there being too many politicians. There simply isn't enough cocaine in the province, damn it! Okay, so what if we freed up some seats by merging some electoral districts together? If we had 80 larger districts by merging areas, we have 45 spare seats to use for balancing things out. Okay, that's pretty good. But can we do even better? Could we figure out a way that even those list guys are connected to the regions? Otherwise, those list people are going to be from party HQ instead of from the area where people voted for the party. What if we take the existing 17 administrative regions of Quebec and we balance each of these regions out with a politician from a list for that region? So we now have the right proportion of seats for the vote, no distracting crazies, local representatives, and we're not paying for extra politicians. And even the politicians balancing out the vote are connected to the regions that voted for them. And that, my friends, is what is being proposed. It's actually a pretty thoroughly considered system. Quite impressive. But the downside is we had so much catching up to do that it's kind of a lot of upgrades at once. You don't really want to be fiddling around with something like your voting system all the time. So if you're going to do it right. This is like going from MS-DOS to Windows 10. You wouldn't go to all the trouble of holding a referendum to upgrade just to end up at Windows 95. Upgrading to Windows 10 does mean that there's a few things to get your head around. Bill 39 is proposing mixed member proportional representation with regions. It's the same voting system that New Zealand has. So we're in good company. But seriously, it's almost always the proposed system these days. New Zealand just has it because they upgraded from first past to post recently as well. On election day with this system, when you go to vote, you choose both a party you want and a local politician that you want. Most people will just go Liberal Party, Liberal candidate, CAQ Party, CAQ candidate. But some people will think, you know, I don't really like that party, but I really like this particular candidate. So I'm going to go for them, but I'll give my party vote to my usual party. When I was a kid, the hippie next door used to vote for the Labour candidate because, you know, he was an old friend, and his party vote went to the Green Party just to keep his friend honest. For the first time ever on this day, many people will get to vote for a party that truly represents their views and not just the third best choice. Even if you don't agree with them, the challenge now becomes changing their minds, not suppressing their position. I have to say, folks, I will take changing people's minds any fucking day. Let me change your mind. Maybe you'll change my mind. It's a much healthier way to operate your political system. Many environmentalists can safely vote for the Green
you're probably gonna have to put his coat on for a bit.
Small government. Socialists who believe in big government.
I'll do it today, though.
People who believe in different government. Over time, we'll probably get to see some of these options. Probably a few.
Because I cut a bunch of fur off, so.
However, before we can get to this, we need to go through the gauntlet of bullshit that surrounds these events. What happens next is incredibly
We're probably going to need to, if it's still cold like this all week, we'll have to start putting his jacket on for a bit. Like, I'll do it today, whatever, but... Because I cut a bunch of fur off.
Lose their job. Many will gain jobs. The whole political class is going to collectively lose their shit. Talking heads and upper bodies like myself will weigh in. There's going to be a version of me on the other side, and they're going to say something like, there's less representation with this system. Oh, that's so terrible. You have to drive 4 more blocks to see a member of the National Assembly, even though it's proven to create a more representative government with lower rates of social equality, higher levels of voter turnout, increase our economic performance.
So that means they're not coming today. That's
nifty. And minorities. And also, the other countries that haven't adopted it look too much like
I guess not
for this to be a coincidence. But you don't want to drive.
Yeah, because it's still Thursday. Like, so since Friday and get to it, that means it's going to be there all week.
And throw it in the garbage. It's awful. The new system is so complicated. Simple.
I saw them cruising around.
Germans will say, you get used to it.
Never.
Each person, they just tick the box with party I like, candidate from a party I like. And you just see a more functional government come out the other end with more satisfied voters because unlike now, most people actually
I don't know. I don't understand anything. I'm too dumb, apparently.
Should I look for what I want to in this situation? How they
I honestly, I don't want to even.
all that shit. That's
I could care less.
Nothing is complicated about the
The longer it takes them to come around, well.
You get what you vote for.
I mean, like, they're around. They're sitting in the street all fucking night, but whatever. As long as I'm not gonna get tickets, I'll give a shit about. Oh, okay.
You know, 40% of them have a job.
I love the fucking this guy.
40% of the seats, and another lot of people have a 20%.
He was in Harry Potter too, I think.
Should have 20% of the seats, and then that will force people to make coalitions.
He's very good in theater. He's on Broadway.
And the whole thing becomes more cooperative.
I think he just did his own Broadway production, actually.
You always get the extremists, whether they are becoming the tail wagging the dog, which is why England is